Joined together by this noble dream. Have you got that? So it's just all the good people, but the second line, part of this family, and the last line, we're joined together by this noble dream. Do that with me. This is a song for all the good people. Come on. All the good people who are part of this family. This is a song for all the good people. We're joined together by this noble dream. Well, this is a song for all of those dreamers. We're looking for answers to come our way. Scientists, doctors, students, all seekers. We share in the hopes for a much brighter day. Come on now. Well, this is a song for all the good people. All the good people who are part of this family. This is a song for all the good people. We're joined together by this noble...
I can't take it anymore. I cannot take the boomer Woodstock ethos any longer. Hopefully we'll finally be rid of it in the next decade or so. And by the way, that was not Bob Dylan or Woody Guthrie or some of the other classic protest singers from the 60s and 70s. No, that was actually former NIH director Francis Collins last week singing and playing guitar at some anti-Trump March for Science rally. You know, I really wasn't a big fan of Francis Collins anyways, especially during his heyday in the pandemic years, along with Dr. Fauci and a cadre of others that I will actually feature on today's podcast. But to my knowledge, Dr. Fauci hasn't pulled out a guitar and tried to become some type of wannabe folk singer. So I got to say, Francis Collins rises up the ranks in who we should prosecute first before we get to everybody else. What's happening, friends? Welcome on into the Check Your Brain podcast. My name is Tony Mazur. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, but happen to stumble upon this because of how I titled it, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. These podcasts go out every Wednesday morning for you. And I'm also on Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur. You could subscribe over there for, well, free, but the good stuff. You know, the naughty things that I like to talk about is usually behind a paywall. If you could subscribe for free, but I'll only give you one episode per week that is free, which is this one. The rest of them you're going to have to pay for as little as $3. I have a $5 tier that has audio and video, and $10 gives you extra podcasts, extra content at patreon.com/Tony Mazur. And if you're watching the show on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, I'm there on Twitter at Tony Mazur, TonyMazur, and as well as my YouTube page that I'm not very active on. Neither am I that active on Rumble, but thank you for checking it out if you have stumbled upon this over there. All right, let's get into the podcast, shall we? So this is my yearly episode, 5 years running, by the way, where I recap the insanity that was the peak years of COVID-19. Now, I said 5 years because it is the 5-year anniversary this week of the lockdowns, of when all of our governors who went from a couple of days earlier said, hey, wash your hands, don't touch your face, to we need to shut society down for 15 days to flatten the curve. Now, some of us were a little more schooled with when it comes to authoritarianism and totalitarianism and the lack of federalism, that it wasn't just going to be 15 days to flatten the curve. Who are you fooling? You're not fooling me. I was pretty well schooled when it comes to all that. But all that was going on 5 years ago. Well, I didn't have a podcast in 2020, but I did have one in 2021, which means this is my 5th year. I've done the 365 days to flatten the curve or whatever it was, and then I've done so every single year here on this podcast, and I will continue documenting it. I'm not just stopping at 5 years. I will go 6 years. I'll go 7. I'll go 10. However long I want to do this podcast, I'm going to talk about these things. And by the way, if you want extra content, I do talk about, because today is more newsworthy stuff. It's clips from back in the day where we're going to see where we were back in 2020, 21, 22, and then we fast forward to today and how there's been a bit of a middle finger, a repudiation of the COVID regime. And that's how I normally do these podcasts. If you want more of what I was doing, a little personal story, go over to Patreon. Actually, if you are checking this out for free, it's up there right now. Where were you 5 years ago today? And I was out in California as things were shutting down. Tom Hanks has coronavirus. I was told by a coworker that, hey, do you think it's a good idea to go to a hockey game, a concert, and a comedy show tonight? And I'm thinking, well, this is probably going to be the last night of normalcy. I may as well enjoy it. And I'm glad I did. But then we saw the fallout. I had to come back from California, and we were locked down in our homes for several months afterward, and then having masks forced on our faces and everything that was going on. Now, some of you who may be listening to this podcast, whether you are a subscriber, a long-time subscriber, short-term time subscriber, or you just happen to find this because you are either pro or con when it comes to the COVID regime, you might wonder why I'm talking about this still. So Clay Travis and Buck Sexton have taken over the time slot that Rush Limbaugh had for many years on premier radio networks. And I remember in 22 and early 23, people were calling and tweeting at Clay Travis by saying, why are you still talking about COVID? We have other things going on. And he's like, I'm going to continue talking about COVID. Now, I don't know if they're still doing it. They may be in the years of reflection. There's the 5 years of COVID reflection that's going on social media. But a lot of people are going to say, come on, Tony, why are you still talking about this? It was 5 years ago. Just get over it. Come on, Tony. It's just, yeah, I was upset too, but we've moved on to other things. I'm concerned about the price of eggs right now and the gas prices and the stock market and the NASDAQ. Everything's down right now. I got to figure out all this other stuff. Why are you still talking about it? Well, stupid. You probably understand that the reason. Oh, my laundry's done. Probably one of the reasons why your eggs are high and everything else is going on is because of what I'm going to talk about and that occurred 5 years ago. And also, again, it's only 5 years ago, not 10 years ago, not 12, and not 80, not 150 years ago. I have to continue hearing about everything that happened. Oh, can you imagine what 150 years ago, slavery, and what happened over in Germany and Poland? But I can't talk about things that happened a half decade ago. Yeah, sorry. No, you're not going to dictate how I do my program. And the powers that be, and even your neighbors, are trying to whitewash everything, all the history that we lived through in real time. Now, I wasn't alive when John F. Kennedy was shot. I was negative 25 years old. I was negative 20 when RFK was shot. I was negative 2 when the Challenger exploded. But I was 13 when 9/11 happened. So I remember it vividly, but my prefrontal cortex was not completely developed at that time. So I got a good understanding of it, but a little bit more so after the fact because I wasn't an adult and I didn't have real world consequences. I was 13 and I was in school. I was in 8th grade in computer lab and going, wow, this is crazy. I can't believe it. But it didn't really affect me all that much. When COVID hit on March 11th, I would say March 11th, 2020, when Tom Hanks got COVID and Rudy Gobert has COVID, but he's touching everyone's microphones. When that all happened, I was 32. I was 3 months away from planning my wedding and honeymoon and everything else. How am I going to pay for all this? What's going to happen? Are we going to even have a wedding? So all of that is up in the air for me. And I talk a little more about that in the podcast coming up later today. But I remember it very well. I was 32. You're not slipping anything past me. You're not going to tell me that things that actually happened didn't happen, or I'm blowing it out of proportion, or come on, Tony, it was just a couple of weeks, because that's what you're going to hear from people. It was just a couple of weeks. It's not a big deal. We reopen. I'm having a hard time believing what's still closed right now. Are you still complaining about this? Come on. All you had to do to be a hero was sit on your couch. That's not that big of a deal. You sat on your couch and watched Tiger King. You got DoorDash coming to your door and you got Amazon delivery. You're a modern day hero just for sitting on your tuchus. Pardon my language. Pardon my Yiddish. Uh, it, that's all you had to do. And you were a hero and you couldn't even do that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're not going to do this to me. You're not going to do this. And it was so strange seeing the behavior of people that were willing to just have the world locked down, especially left wingers. Especially, I know a certain local comedian. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. There's a local comedian who I believe has a hammer and sickle tattoo. He was the one who was simping for harsh authoritarianism during COVID. Listen to your politicians, listen to the experts. Oh, that's strange. Now, if Donald Trump on March 11th said everyone should wear masks, they would say, well, screw you. I'm not wearing a mask just because he says I'm not going to, oh, turnstiles. That's what happened. And because Trump was not taking COVID serious enough, he wasn't demonstrative enough as far as harsh lockdowns at the beginning. That's why the left went harsh lockdowns. How do I know this? Because a month earlier, when Trump was talking about shutting down travel to China, you had Democrat politicians saying, no, 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 go to Chinatown. Go hug your Chinese person, your local Chinaman. Go eat dim sum. Go for it. Eat cats. Whatever. Get your jollies off because Trump is being racist towards Chinese people. Go make out with a Chinese person. Just take their mask down and play a little tonsil hockey with them. Yeah, because that's what was going on. And it was incredible what was happening at that time that I lived through, that you lived through. And there are people who are trying to whitewash that history. And my my answer to that is you do not let them. So in today's episode, I am going to once again go through where we were, the craziness, the stuff that left-wing politicians, some right-wing politicians, your neighbor, your sister, your cousin, your grandma, your aunt who watches too much MSNBC is going to say, that didn't happen. You're blowing out of proportion. In fact, actually, I have a screenshot from a story from The Guardian that came out this week that says 5 years on from the pandemic, the right's fake COVID narrative has been turbocharged into the mainstream. Oh, really? It's my fault. See, I created this narrative, this false reality. See, you were living in actual reality that you were, again, a hero for sitting on your ass on the couch. But I don't know. I was kind of alive then. I was an adult. I saw what was happening. I documented it in real time. And that's why I'm going to talk about it here on today's podcast. So, across the globe, they're doing all these commemorations of the 5-year anniversary. Here's this one in the UK. There's been some protests and there's some events that are taking place around there on the 5th anniversary of the COVID pandemic. Here's Big Ben. People gathered on it doesn't have any vowels. BLWCH Mountain in the Welsh Valleys are where a memorial bench and heart are located. Everyone getting together, somber. Crowds gather in Glasgow to hear a choir sing ahead of the minute's silence. A plaque and a wreath were placed to honor those who died with the disease. By the way, where are the masks at? Oh, that's right, because they didn't work in the first place. I'm risking my YouTube account with medical disinformation and misinformation. I've already gotten dinged before, so my response is this. Anyways, but there are protests that are going on around this, and my honest to God response to this when they showed over in London, they showed Big Ben, 12 noon, the bells chiming. I think the only way of accountability at this point, since we're not seeing enough of that, is you should throw politicians off of Big Ben. That's the only way we can have some type of accountability at this point because it seems like we keep reelecting the same people who locked us in our homes and forced us to do crazy things during a crazy time. Now, what were some of those crazy things? Well, this is another one that's a montage video that I'm going to have to narrate, but if you're watching on the video, you get to see this. So remember wearing masks in pools? Oh, that was a thing. Don't let them tell you it wasn't. All right, so I'm not going to play the circus music, but I'll recap what is being played there for the folks only listening on the audio. You had a person swimming in a pool, and how do I know this, that this was a thing? I actually know people who were taking their kids to swim lessons where they were wearing masks in a pool, and they didn't think anything about it. They're like, well, what's the big deal? Yeah, no, see, this is what Dr. Fauci and Dr. Collins recommend, and guys, you know what? We got to stay safe. You're in chlorine. When I was in Key West for my honeymoon, after we abandoned our West Coast trip for Florida, even though we didn't realize that some parts of Florida were actually worse than California, I'll tell you that much. And we were going to a pool bar, Dante's Pool Bar in Key West, and they said, hey, if you're going to go in the pool, you have to wear a mask. And I said, I'm not wearing a mask. I'm not doing it. They actually said, well, we were just trying to stay open. I'm like, I get that, but don't you see the insanity? It's 89 degrees outside. It's bright sunshine, and we're in a pool with chlorine, and you're going to tell me to wear a mask? Well, look, I'm just trying to follow the rules. I get it, but at some point, you got to have a little bit of disobedience, right? But that was July of 2020. Then you had people in getting masks who were arrested. Authorities were forcing masks on them. People leaving a plane on the tarmac, they were getting sprayed down. God only knows what. Maybe it's DDT. All right, wait. Let me mute this. Get rid of the circus music. What else we got? Oh yeah, remember you had to sit at your table and you had to pull your mask down. Then if you wanted to go to this is a concert. I would assume that's later in 2020 or something, that you had to be 6 feet apart. Kids wearing hazmat suits to visit grandma and grandpa. You get little pods there. I remember Joe Biden during his presidential run. Here's a woman forcing a mask on her dog. You have people exercising in bubbles. Then you have somebody with a plastic, what looks like a laundry bag. This guy just has plastic bags over his face. Dressing your kids up as Pfizer vaccines for Halloween. This is an Asian gentleman with an entire box of masks on his face. A woman spraying down her coffee with some kind of hand sanitizer at the drive-thru. These are people wearing globes on their head like they're astronauts. And more swimming with masks on at the pool. Then somebody got creative and said, I don't need to take my mask off if I make some kind of contraption where I unzip it and use it as some type of Pac-Man mouth. Yeah, we lived through that. Don't let them tell you that we didn't go through that whole process. Then you had the TikTok nurses. Remember all the TikTok nurses that were dancing? Then you had crisis actors who were in completely empty hospital wards, but we're like, we're getting so overwhelmed. So here's CBS News on April 5th, 2020. In tears, a nurse says she quit her job after she was asked to work in a coronavirus ICU without a face mask. America is not prepared, and nurses aren't being protected. Oh.
America is not prepared, and nurses are not being protected. I quit my job today. I went into work and I was assigned to a COVID patient on an ICU unit that has been converted to a designated COVID unit. None of the nurses are wearing masks, not even surgical masks, in the hallways when they're giving report to each other. I had my own N95 mask. I told my manager, I understand we're short on supplies, but let me protect myself. Let me feel safe. I have family that I have to come home to, and the way things are looking, this isn't gonna get any better. America is not prepared, and nurses are not being protected.
So this was a crisis actor. She didn't actually work in a nursing facility. She just went on TikTok and of course CBS News, because I worked at a news station at the time, was looking for content like this just to make Donald Trump look bad. Let's be honest here. What was that? What was all of this craziness? Yes, there were Republicans, but they were anti-Trump Republicans. There were people who didn't understand what was going on. They're like, oh, well, I want to look good reach across the aisle and look bipartisan. See, the two people who shut their state down first were Republicans. It was Mike DeWine and Larry Hogan in Maryland. And then all the Democrats fell in line because it was able to be a useful tool against Trump. But in those days, remember, it was nurses, we just don't have enough supplies. They had plenty of supplies. A mostly empty hospital is a bankrupt hospital, is a closed hospital. You need to operate near capacity. Oh, the hospital beds are at capacity. Yeah, that's called normal hospitals. That's what happens with medical care. Why were the TikTok nurses out there? Oh, they were just blowing off steam, Tony. Come on, they were making dances. They were they have to deal with these long hours. Yeah, they had long hours and they didn't treat one patient. They went to work and said, I'm sick of watching Tiger King right now. I'm sick of watching whatever garbage Netflix and Hulu are putting on their services. So why not us form a dance? And that's what they did. So all this, again, was crisis acting in those early days. But they want to tell you that, the stuff didn't happen. What are you talking about, Tony? This is just, it's a figment of your imagination. You've created this narrative, this right-wing echo chamber narrative that people were arrested for the crime of playing hockey. Oh, wait, no, that did happen.
Stop! What are you? Just let him go.
Let him take off his skates. Come on.
Leaving. He gave us the warning.
Let him take off his skates.
Get on the ground. Why are you guys doing? I haven't done anything wrong. He gave us a warning. We're all leaving.
He is not leaving.
I just asked
take
you
off
what
his
you guys were
skates.
doing to that little kid. Well, I know, but you gave us a warning and you said we're all okay.
Yeah, this is going on the fucking news for sure. Just for skating on the outdoor rink, eh?
Finish, like, what? You guys asked him to get off the ice. Keep videoing. You guys asked him to get off the ice.
What are you guys doing?
What are you guys doing?
We're arresting you.
For what? For what? For what?
Ocean. For skating on the ocean.
For what?
Okay.
Ocean. Don't tease me, okay?
They're arresting some. Now, well, here's what they're going to say is like, no, see, we had stay-at-home orders and you disobeyed them. Now, granted, that is in Alberta, and Canada was significantly worse, even than America was when it came to the lockdowns, and then eventually a couple of years later with the trucker protest in 2022. But remember, when they try to whitewash the narrative, remember, they arrested people for the crime of getting exercise, that your kids couldn't go to the jungle gym because they put caution tape over everything, that you couldn't go surfing. They had cops arresting a surfer by himself. If you want to go by the metric of social distancing, you can't get any more socially distanced than being on a wave in the middle of the ocean when it's 80-something degrees, bright sunshine. And they arrested him. That happened. And when you were on the beach, then they filled in the skate parks. Oh, that happened. Oh, yeah, they're going to memory hole this too. So yeah, this is a mobile equipment that is filling in skate parks because they didn't want non-sportsmen skaters to enjoy themselves at the skate park. So if we fill in with sand, then it will deter them from congregating at the skate park. This happened. if MSNBC Wine Ant says, oh, there was just a couple of weeks of inconvenience, which is what basically a lot of lefties say nowadays, that if you bring up the lockdowns, they say we were never actually locked down, that it was a couple of weeks where you may have been slightly inconvenienced, and sure, maybe you had to wear a mask in a store, but ultimately we went back to normal, right? No, we did not. And I am not going to make you forget, which is why I'm going to do this podcast every year for the foreseeable future. What else went on during that time? Oh, that's right. George Floyd died. I've noticed, by the way, conservatives have talked, like the Daily Wire types have posted about free Derek Chauvin. It would have been nice if he said that when he was on trial for a murder that he did not commit, that George Floyd killed George Floyd. He died of excited delirium. There was no there was no harm done to his trachea or to his cervical spine. There was none of that, but he was the sacrificial lamb during that time, and you had to throw him behind bars because otherwise cities are going to riot even more. I get it, but it would have been nice to be a little bit more demonstrative instead of waiting 4 years later. Anyways, George Floyd died, had 72 funerals, but you couldn't see your dad. If your dad died, or even if your dad is in the hospital, hopefully not one in New York when Andrew Cuomo, who's apparently going to run for mayor of New York, and he may win, forced COVID-positive patients back into nursing homes and just murdered everybody. And but you weren't able to go to your father's or mother's funeral. So here's a great one, and I use that in quotes. These two sons, I believe it was, it says here from James Melville, COVID day of reflection during the lockdown era, we couldn't even mourn loved ones properly. This son moved his chair next to his mother to comfort her at the funeral of her late husband. And what happened? They were told to separate. You had to be separated. Sorry, I understand that your dad died, but you know what? We don't want more people dying. So because that's what people said at the time. They said, well, do you want more death? Then have them separate. Sorry, your mom is grieving over here because her husband of decades died, the love of her life, and the father of your children. But you know what? Stay safe and wear a mask and socially distance.
It's my privilege to have been asked to conduct our service today to celebrate the life of Alan Wright. I therefore offer you all a very warm welcome as we unite in love and friendship to
now again, it's not in the U.S., but when someone is like, yeah, let's go closer to mom, because mom is bawling her eyes out with her husband in there. And again, I will have people tell me to this day, stop talking about this. What's the big deal? Why are you dedicating an entire podcast to talking about COVID? That was 5 years ago. We're past this. And by the way, that was the right decision, right? You don't want more people getting sick. You keep them socially distanced. So what? Yeah, so what? Her husband is dead. Doesn't mean you need to kill more people. I remember this vividly. They justified this. These are monsters. And these are monsters who have not faced any type of accountability. Sure, maybe electoral accountability in some ways, but no. Sorry, I'm looking at Nuremberg trials for these people. Especially this funeral director is like, no, you stay there, separate, social distance. Some BS metric that never actually existed, and it was not rooted in science. But forget about just adults. What about the kids? Now, of all people, Tim Robbins, who I've disagreed with on virtually everything he's said my entire life. Bull Durham came out the year I was born. Everything Tim Robbins has said in the press, I've pretty much disagreed with. Until now, here's an interesting thing from actor Tim Robbins.
This was changed as well. We went into lockdown with healthy people and with children, and that didn't seem to be wise to me. So I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I don't know the intricacies of data on this. All I can respond to is as someone that is concerned about what the result of those doctrines, that policy had on us as human beings. And it's not good. We turned into tribal, angry, vengeful people. And I don't think that's something that is sustainable for the earth, that we start demonizing people that don't agree with our particular health policies and turn them into monsters, turn them into pariahs, say that they don't deserve a hospital bed. I think about, people that have made bad mistakes in their lives where they take too many drugs and they overdose, and that's totally their choice. That's totally their responsibility. Yet we take care of them. Yet we bring them to the hospital. Yet we save their lives because we're compassionate, because we want to make sure that people live. And this turned. It turned into, you should fucking die because you have not complied. That's incredibly dangerous.
And it's interesting that Tim Robbins says this because he's a true liberal. And I've noticed in the last couple of years that there's been a little bit of a pendulum shift, that people who used to be considered classical liberals have shifted right. Now, I'm not saying Tim Robbins is going to wear a MAGA hat, but it is interesting to see people who claim to be liberals and that cared about everyone said, oh, we need to lock down for your safety. We need to force things into your arm for your safety. And if you do this, it really is interesting how that party of joy are really actually the most joyless people. But good for Tim Robbins for saying that, especially talking about the humanity and children. And by the way, fourth grade test scores have fallen since 2019, particularly for the lowest achieving students. So math and reading, it's amazing the drop off that happened according to the National Center of Education Statistics. And what? That's fine. It's no problem. Kids are resilient. That's what I've heard. Kids are resilient. See, you put something in front of them, they'll figure out a way. They'll compartmentalize. Kids can take it. Yeah, kids are resilient when it comes to divorce. Kids are resilient when it comes to abusive or alcoholic parents. Kids are resilient with abusive teachers. Kids are resilient when you tell them that we're going to keep you at home for 2 years, and we're going to expect that your cognitive abilities will continue and actually continue growing from where you were a couple of years ago. Now, there are a lot of big-time communities that were shut down for several years. There were especially big city schools that didn't have kids going back to school until September 2022. I'm no math major, but, my math skills probably went off the cliff during that time too. But I can tell you that's 2.5 years. You're going to tell me that those kids can just make up those 2.5 years like no problem? No. Not the case. And that all happened, again, less than 5 years ago. Here's an elderly woman during the COVID times who apparently had dementia, and she was, of course, denied the right to touch and hold her son. You weren't allowed to see grandma. Can't see mom. Sorry, mom is suffering from some horrible, horrible mental disease. And she recognizes you. And because of Francis Collins and his guitar and Dr. Fauci and either elected or unelected bureaucrats, they said, no, you can't see her. Sorry, too bad, so sad.
Okay. Hey, I love you. I wish.
Her mom wants to see her son, and he's like, I can't. They're not letting me in there. And it's heartbreaking watching this woman who's going through it, the worst thing imaginable to happen to especially anyone of any age, but especially at that time when you're confused about life in general, and then this happens. I I would assume this woman's probably not with us anymore, and I don't know if she is able to, she was able to finally get a chance to see her son. And you had people that you're related to, not even just people with nice teeth and hair on the news and politicians. You had people you knew personally, people in your family that said this is justified. What do you want mom to die? What if you coughed? What if you had something? What if you were asymptomatic and that you spread this onto her? You could kill her. There are a lot of grandparents and great-grandparents who said at the time, I will risk getting COVID and dying from it if I can hug my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But they couldn't see them, while TikTok nurses are bored on exercise balls filming videos. That's nice. That's just wonderful. That's fantastic. But again, you want to talk about what Tim Robbins was saying, the lack of humanity that was going on. So 2020 was the lack of humanity. You can't see everybody. Then you had the mandates for the vaccine in 2021. That if you didn't get the vaccine and you weren't up to date on your 2 shots, maybe you got the 1-shot J&J, or you got the 2-shot Moderna or Pfizer. And then a couple of months later, yeah, you got to get your booster. Yeah, that's still effective, but you got to get your booster. Well, if you weren't up to date in 21 and 22, and especially showing your vaccine card, your Excelsior pass, they were going to demonize you and dehumanize you in the public. Here, this is from Britain, where they were openly saying that you need to just snitch on your neighbors and lock down the people who are unvaccinated. Openly. Again, where's your humanity?
Now, I have a lot of sympathy with what they're going to do in Austria, because I cannot understand for the life of me why people believe this rubbish on the internet, the anti-vax propaganda. It is deranged. We know there's figures from the Office of National Statistics that say, what is it, you're 32,000 times more likely to die if you've not been double jabbed from COVID. There's no possible reason, unless you've got underlying health symptoms, not to have the jab. But my worry about doing it is, how do you enforce it? Do you stop everybody in the street? Who's going to stop people in the street? We don't have enough police officers on the beat anyway. So how would you make it work in Britain?
Well, you'd do it through snitches, wouldn't you, Storm? That worked.
Makes me uneasy.
It worked in lockdown. We had people saying, get round, we can hear a karaoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We did.
Well, I think if anyone was having parties,
but this is Austria,
this would work. But I don't think, even if you called up the police and said, oh, I've seen my neighbour go out to their friend's house, you can't, like, there's no proof of that if they end up back at their house.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, so what the police do is they do spot checks. Right. So when you're at shopping, you might see an officer, and the officer says, show me your card.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to risk having a fake card, you can do it, but you'd be in a lot of trouble.
But then what happens if you break the rules? Are they going to imprison them in Austria? Fine them?
There's a question.
In France, there was only one.
Prisons full of unvaccinated people. Sorry.
In France, in Paris, there was only one person who was unvaccinated on the platform, and a security guard came up and said, I don't know, that'll be 192 or 162 euro fine.
So how did he know he was unvaccinated?
No, this was to do with making sure everybody's masked.
Yeah.
So they're taking very rigorous action.
He was unmasked.
But nowhere could you go to the museums or anywhere without showing your vaccination.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to stop it here because it's kind of giving me a bit of PTSD. I don't know about you, but I worked with people like this. Not to name names, not to name companies, but I worked at a radio station at the time where they openly discussed this and did not even think that there should be any dissidence. There's no disagreeing here. Yeah, no, if you don't wear your mask, you shouldn't be allowed anywhere. Oh, you pulled your mask down really quick? Well, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to eject you from the store. We're going to ban you. We may as well put you up next to the child molesters and the thieves because you had your mask slightly below your nostrils. And if God forbid, if you had a fake card, the Antonio Brown trading cards, as we used to call them back in the day, that if you showed a card that was fake, that they didn't track the lot number, then yeah, you should be arrested. You should be banished from society. Isn't that weird to think about that people openly said this just 4 years ago? Not even 4 years ago, weirdly enough. This was like summertime of 2021. So 3+ years ago, you had people openly saying if you are not compliant with what the government says, with these arbitrary lockdowns and mandates and statistics, then you may as well just be banned from society. And there's no repentance. Like, what are we going to do next? How are you going to be? How are you going to show that you have repented for your actions in the public right now, that will let you be a part of society again? Now, there were some people that were okay on it. That's kind of why I started this podcast, because I remember going for runs, and I hate running, but with gyms closed and I don't really have a lot of workout stuff at home, I had to do what I had to do. So I would go for runs, and I would go for runs for a couple of hours. Then I'd walk, I'd jog, I'd run, and listen to different podcasts. And a lot of the podcasts I listened to 5 years ago honestly failed me. They didn't have what I was looking for. I wanted something a little bit better, and they were not providing it for me. So, but there were a couple of podcasts who I thought did a pretty good job, and one of them was Dave Smith with his Part of the Problem podcast.
I hear your understanding of the pandemic. I don't agree. I lived it closer than you in many ways, closer than any of you probably in many ways. And there were absolutely mistakes made. The idea that it was a totalitarian regime, that's hyperbole.
No.
All right, can I respond? Because there was a lot there, so I want to try to respond to as much of it as I can.
I didn't mean to flood the zone.
No.
Take it one by one.
We can go one by one. Okay, first of all, when I describe the lockdowns that swept this nation in 2020 as totalitarian, just to be clear, I'm not being hyperbolic. When you're waking up every morning to watch your TV, to find out from your governor what you're allowed to do today, including, am I allowed to go to work? Am I allowed to have a funeral for my father? Am I allowed to see my family? Am I allowed to step outside without a cover on my face? There is one word and one word only for that, and that is totalitarianism. I'm sorry. That's not slightly hyperbolic.
Correct. He's correct about that. The fact that people waited every day for 2 years to hear what their governor said we can do today. Every day. We had it in Ohio. I've discussed it on countless occasions. We had what was called Wine with DeWine. So at 2 o'clock every day, Mike DeWine, our diminutive, rapidly diminishing faculties at this point, governor of Mike DeWine, will call a 2 o'clock press conference with the health director in the state of Ohio, Amy Acton, who, by the way, pro-abortionist, running as a Democrat in the governor's race coming up pretty soon. And you had a lot of these working from home moms and women that would pour themselves a glass of wine and hear today's COVID statistics. They'd guess what tie Mike DeWine is wearing. Ooh, is he wearing a Denison University tie? Ooh, and they'd come up and go, oh, this tie is from the University of Toledo. Oh, shoot. Well, maybe I'll do bids for next week. We'll see what happens. And then eventually it got to a point where it was a circus where the governor's wife was coming out and talking about her strawberry rhubarb pies and ugh. And by the way, Mike DeWine should notice that Mike and Fran DeWine have been very active in bringing the Haitians to Springfield, Ohio. But it's neither here nor there. And then they would call Amy Acton up. Good afternoon, everybody. The latest numbers are 5 more people contracted the coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, and that we should all gather together, but not gather together, but we should all just sit at home and listen in tomorrow, and I'll talk about tomorrow's stats. And people did that, and they would drink wine next to their computer when they're on the clock, but they didn't tell anybody because, wine. See, I have a glass of Pinot Noir over here. See, that's a nice, actually, I prefer a good red blend as opposed to whites. Well, we'll put that next. We'll have my wine with DeWine. People waited for the instructions on, am I allowed to get my mail today? And again, not hyperbole. Now, I can understand why a bunch of Democrats were about that. I will say Dave Smith was much better than all the other libertarians at that time. Here is Joe Jorgensen, who ran for president. Still not as bad as Chase Oliver for the Libertarian Party, but in 2020, as we're all dealing with the authoritarianism and the totalitarianism of the COVID regime, here she is, says, it is not enough to be passively not racist. We must be actively anti-racist. Hashtag Black Lives Matter. Hashtag vote gold. Yeah, well, I'm glad she was focused on the things that matter. Remember at that time that if you went out and played cornhole and drank Miller Lite with one of your buddies, that was a breaking of the COVID protocols. But if you were out in the streets protesting for George Floyd or black trans lives in Brooklyn, you can gather with 10,000 people. As long as you're wearing your mask, everything will be A-OK, be right as rain. Deborah Birx, by the way, I should read this one from Kevin Bass here. This is kind of interesting. She, about a month or so ago, had a new memoir that came out and basically admitted that a lot of what was pushed during the COVID years was BS, especially when it came to vaccines. Deborah Birx, from her memoir, explaining how 2 weeks to flatten the curve was just a marketing for harsh, months-long lockdowns that she was really planning. On Monday and Tuesday, March 9th and 10th, 2020, we worked simultaneously to develop the Flatten the Curve guidance I hope to present to the Vice President at week's end. Remember, this is Mike Pence, who headed up the coronavirus task force. How'd that work out? What are you doing now, Mike? Getting buy-in on the simple mitigation measures every American could take was just the first step leading to longer and more aggressive interventions. We had to make these palatable to the administration by avoiding the obvious appearance of a full Italian lockdown. No sooner had we convinced the Trump administration to implement our version of a 2-week shutdown than I was trying to figure out how to extend it. 15 days to slow the spread was a start, but I knew it would be just that. I didn't have the numbers in front of me yet to make the case for extending it longer, but I had 2 weeks to get them. Dr. Birx confessed in her own memoir to lying to Trump and the American people. So 2 weeks to did you fall for that? Did you really think it was going to be 2 weeks? Did you think by March, let's say March 16th, which was a Monday, that by March 31st, we were going to be back to normal and we can go back to restaurants and bars and get my hair cut and do all that fun stuff, or just living a normal life, which we couldn't do for years, multiple years. You still had to wear masks at the airport as of April 2022. So it was multiple years. Some of you bought it. Some of you are like, yeah, you know what? I don't mind. I could work from home on my laptop instead of waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning to get ready and make coffee and make breakfast. And maybe I get more coffee at Starbucks and then I got to wait in line there and this and that. And by the time I get to the office, I've already been up for 2+ hours. Instead, I can roll out of bed at 8:55 and work from home and then drink wine at 2 o'clock when the governor talks. Is that how you felt? Some of you liked that. In fact, there's a lot of people who are talking about pandemic nostalgia. The pandemic nostalgia. I think I covered it in 2 years ago's podcast, that you had Zoomers, high school kids on TikTok saying, gosh, I pine, I yearn for the days of the simpler times of the COVID lockdowns because I didn't have to go anywhere and I didn't have to deal with any of this stuff. Okay, well, no one's stopping you from doing that. No one's stopping you from living a normal life, from unplugging social media, from throwing your phone out, throwing it in your toilet and not putting it in a bag of rice. You're allowed to live on the land. You're allowed to do all that. No one's stopping you. You can. Don't force it on me. That was the point. I told this to one of my good buddies who told me he had some kind of, I think he said he had a he had a bladder or kidney issue, and that's why he said everyone should lock down. It's much easier for him. And I said, so because you have a medical condition, that means 330 million people should all abide by your anecdotal condition, who, by the way, is still alive, still healthy, and it's not a problem. I'm like, I have a cyst on my kidney at the time. I don't know, I may still have it. Do I think the world should shut down to cater to my needs, to my medical needs at this time? No, I don't expect that because I live in the real world. I want normalcy. If something is going on with me, I don't expect everybody to stop what they're doing and fixate on whatever's going on in my mind and whatever's going on mentally and physically with me, because that's selfish. But a lot of people decide they wanted to be selfish at that time, while all at the same time accusing me of being selfish. So here we have, this is kind of interesting. March 29th, 2021, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky infamously declared on MSNBC, vaccinated people do not carry the virus, they do not get sick. March 29th, 2021. Emails obtained by a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act from January 30th, 2021 show that Walensky knew this was a lie at the time, and she said it. Said, see for yourself, without these lies, unconstitutional vaccine mandates would not have been possible. That's why she lied. She and her colleagues need to be held accountable for these lies. Here she is saying that.
Our data from the CDC today suggests, that vaccinated people do not carry the virus, don't get sick, and that it's not just in the clinical trials, but it's also in real-world data.
So there she is. She's lying. So, yeah, so there you have it. So 2 months before she says this, which many of them continued saying it, like Rachel Maddow and Joe Biden, hey, you can't get sick if you get this vaccination. You can't get sick, man. Corn pop, you got the COVID. Yeah, okay. She's lying here because she's not a doctor. She's a vaccine pusher. She is a drug pusher. Her goal was to push this onto people, to propagandize them, to scare and fearmonger them in order to take an unproven shot into their arms. And that's what she was doing. So she knows it's a lie. She went on TV anyways. So again, Nuremberg trial style hearings should be happening right now. Instead, I don't know what she's doing. I would assume she's probably writing a book. She should be disgraced. She should be. She shouldn't be even allowed to work at a fast food joint. She should be behind bars along with all of them. And that is the moderate position, in my opinion. There you have. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Oh, I love this one. Remember Bill de Blasio? You remember the mayor of New York who was just so bad. It was an open communist, especially his wife, who I believe was a lesbian or is still a lesbian, but somehow squeezed out a mulatto child. Bill de Blasio, actual name is Warren Wilhelm. Bill de Blasio changed his name because, it sounds kind of cool in Italian in New York, so why not? Not Warren Wilhelm? Bill de Blasio is not the mayor anymore of New York, but here he is when he was the mayor, trying to entice people into taking an unproven gene therapy, these vaccines, by saying you can get free French fries. Oh boy, I got to tell you, I was up in the air as far as questioning the COVID vaccine, but you know what? Now that he is offering burgers and fries, gosh, I might have to reconsider my previous stance.
Free fries when you get vaccinated? I got vaccinated. You're saying I could get this? These delicious fries? Wait a minute. But there's also a burger element to this? Let me check with Bill Neathart. Is it too early in the day to eat a burger? No. This can be breakfast? Okay. I want you to look at this and think about, again, some people love hamburgers, some don't. Really want to respect all ways of life. But if this is appealing to you, just think of this when you think of vaccination.
Vax and a side of fries in New York. You get a free, if you show your COVID vaccine voucher, whether it's the actual card or on your phone, then you get free fries and maybe a burger. And I remember other places where it was a bribe. It was a bribe to get you to get vaccinated. But people fell for it. There were people who fell for it. They didn't really have to, but if you were kind of on the fence, but I could go for a burger and fries. It's a shot. What's the big deal? I remember Krispy Kreme donuts did this. Now, we knew by February, March, and April of 2021 that the COVID disease, the actual disease, disproportionately affected people with 3 to 4 comorbidities, meaning probably someone with diabetes, probably someone who's obese, probably someone with this, and this disease. So why not tell them to go get some fresh air? Maybe go surfing if they're not going to get arrested, or skateboarding, or playing hockey, or swimming, or something. And instead, you incentivize them to stay on their fat asses on the couch. And if they do want to get off the couch, they should go get vaccinated. And by the way, if you show your card, you get a free, I think it was, I don't remember, it may have been a free dozen donuts at Krispy Kreme, or just one donut. But I'm thinking, so you're going to incentivize people for getting vaccinated over a disease that's disproportionately affecting people who shouldn't be eating Krispy Kreme donuts. And again, I brought it up to normies at work. They're like, well, no, they're just trying to get people to obey the laws. We want to get back to normal, don't we? Well, we didn't really get back to normal. In fact, we're still abnormal as a society. Here's what I would love to know. What happened to all the people in 2021 who got a COVID vaccine tattoo? So if you're only listening to the audio and the podcast right now, I am showing pictures of people who went out in 2021 who, this one says March 16th, 2021, who got a tattoo of the COVID, the germ, with a Band-Aid and J&J on there, meaning Johnson & Johnson. You know, the first vaccine that actually got pulled because of health problems. Imagine that. Then you have another person, March 21st, COVID-19. They got their Pfizer with the germ on it. This person just has a little Band-Aid because I got my COVID vaccine. Yeah, my Band-Aid that they put on me, but I put a smiley face because I'm protected. And then, of course, the piece de resistance, the COVID vax card showing that they are vaccinated. They got their 2 shots with their dates, their lot number, and everything like that. They took it, had some tattoo artist plant it on their arm. At least, is that their arm, or is that, I don't know what part of that body it is, but it's on there, plastered on them there. I assume all 4 of them have had these tattoos covered up in some way, because I think 100% of these people ended up getting COVID after this, whether they got their booster and then they got COVID. But these are people who left the home. I assume they got COVID and they said that, well, this doesn't really do anything because I thought I was protected, which is why I got this tattoo. You know, it's here for life. So I assume they got some cover up. They either got it lasered off. I think you could probably laser off the Band-Aid, and you can laser off the COVID vax card. But boy, that germ with the Johnson & Johnson thing, that's really not anything to be proud of. You want to talk about a participation trophy? That's a participation ribbon that you got tattooed on yourself for life. Good job, stupid. Speaking of COVID shots, this was from fairly recent. So Joe Rogan on his podcast showed the video that I have played probably a couple of times on the podcast, on my podcast, of Keith Olbermann getting his COVID shot back in 2021 and saying that if you are against getting it, it just means you are afraid.
Give me some volume. So he's getting his shot with his stupid mask on. He's got his
shot.
He's got his
accomplished. And it is time to stop coddling them, the ones who won't get the damn shot already. And our first step, you and I, is symbols, the language we use. We call these people vaccine hesitant, vaccine skeptics, anti-vax. We say they're protesting mandates and passports. They're making a personal choice. They're waiting for more information. They're making a medical decision. Bullshit! They're afraid. They're afraid to get vaccinated.
Correct.
Stop feeding their egos about what they're doing. Stop legitimizing it. Vaccine hesitant, they're afraid. Vaccine skeptics, They're afraid. Anti-vax. They're afraid. They're protesting mandates and passports. They're afraid.
The little bit of spittle in his upper lip makes it
they're afraid.
extra good.
They're waiting for more information. Afraid. They're making a medical decision to be afraid. The snowflakes are afraid.
Okay, you can stop. We get it.
gosh.
We get it. Isn't it wonderful?
Wow.
But he's doing this for social credit. He's doing this to virtue signal. He's doing this to show everybody. He's holding up his card. I'm compliant. You know.
And he thinks it's gonna benefit him.
Oh yeah.
Somewhere. There's a payoff.
Socially, he feels like he is on the side of the intelligent people who trust the science. Yeah.
I wonder if someone asked him to do the video.
I doubt it.
But
maybe, possibly. I know that they definitely did encourage people to post things on social media.
Yeah. So it was encouraged enough to the point where you got a little reward emotionally.
Good job, Keith.
But they're leveraging that authority and the tribe.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna. Nobody celebrity's gonna talk like that on TV unless lots of people agree. He's got to have a lot of backing.
Plenty of people agreed with him. But the thing about it is, like, afraid of what? Like, you're not saying what they're afraid of. They're afraid of what everyone's experiencing right now, Keith.
Yeah.
Massive side effects.
Yeah.
Look at the amount of people that have myocarditis. Look at the rises in all of these autoimmune disorders and all these different things that neurological conditions that people are dealing with that are vaccine injured.
I've got a friend of mine that was kicked out of the military for not getting it. And it broke my heart. He was in for 19 years. He was about to retire and get pension and all that kind of stuff.
Now, the Trump administration apparently is going to bring those people back if they want to come back with back pay.
Yes.
Is that happening to him?
Yes.
That's great.
He's going back in. And he was a commander.
It's fucking crazy. Well, good for him, first of all, for sticking to his guns, you know?
Yeah, so it's amazing how far we've come, and I'll get to that. I know I'm setting this up because we'll get to everything, but I just always have to, in these podcasts, lay out where we were. And again, Keith Olbermann, who has been fired from every network possible, ESPN several times, and Fox Sports, and MSNBC, and he just yells on Twitter now, basically. And he posts that video. They're afraid. Yeah, they are, actually. And I think they're right to be afraid. And where are we at right now in mid-March of 2025? I'm going to go ahead and say, no matter all the fake stories I've heard a lot of them of these nurses by saying that, I was treating a COVID patient who wasn't vaccinated, and I went up and said, "Are you vaccinated?" I said, "No, I wasn't. Skeptical, but I don't know." And they're like, "Well, sorry, looks like you FAFO'd." It's not true. 100% of the people who have not been vaccinated do not regret not getting vaccinated. Not one person in 2025 who did not get the COVID shot is sitting there going, gosh, well, you know what? I probably should have been vaccinated. I would say, though, there's a large chunk, maybe not a majority, but a sizable chunk of people who are vaccinated, whether they were coerced because of maybe a girlfriend or wife, maybe their job that dangled over their head, or a promotion or a bonus at work if they got the shot, or some people, and I feel bad for these people, that said, look, if this was our path to normalcy and getting back to some semblance of normal, then I will take the bullet, I will take the literal shot, and maybe we'll get back to normal. I'm sympathetic towards those people, but a lot of them regret getting that shot. And there's really not much you can do to convince them otherwise. Now, remember, Joe Biden was pushing the shot all the way up until the midterms in 2022.
And we're here with a simple message. Get vaccinated. Update your COVID vaccine. It's incredibly effective, but the truth is not enough people are getting it. We've got to change that so we can all have a safe and healthy holiday season. And we're
okay. So safe and healthy holiday season. By the way, this is Joe Biden, who already had gotten COVID and kept getting it over the summer of 2022, even though he was vaccinated and boosted all over the place and had to take Paxlovid. Yeah. You notice that didn't really come up in the election cycle. Anybody discussing COVID, not even Trump's side, not even Republicans were a little bit more anti-mandate and everything. But it certainly wasn't brought up on the left. It was like, whatever. It was years ago. What's the big deal? Not a big deal. So where are we at today? Where are we at with the COVID hysteria? Like I said, a lot of people have just said that was years ago. We've moved on from it. But you got a couple of stragglers every so often. So here is a COVID-conscious bowling alley somewhere in Oregon.
Hey, I'm Amanda, and come with me as 80 of my COVID-cautious friends go bowling in Portland, Oregon. We were super thrilled to have Kingpins open before hours for us and agree to mask. We had about 80 people, including kids of all ages and adults, come out and join us this morning from 9 to 10:30. Check out those Aeronet numbers. That's because we had purifiers up the ass. We also had this adult-only section that was really great. Here are a bunch of adults who are in a separate area away from the kids. But we had tons of kids, and they were all having a great time. There were ball ramps. It was completely accessible. We were able to accommodate people who needed extra space or specific conditions. We were really well spread out here, and like these lanes have like bumpers that come up for individual bowlers. It's a completely new world, and this really charming bowler was explaining, but you can't hear her because of the mask and the noise, how she hasn't been bowling in years, and she doesn't, and her brother don't get to do this sort of thing all that often. And she's showing you the nails she got done at the Manning Petty event we did on Friday. And then this is her brother kind of saying the same thing, but a little bit more sullenly because...
Okay, so this was normal just a couple of years ago. I have to keep bringing that point up. Even in 2022, you had people saying, "Well, I have still COVID concerns." When I went to get my appendix removed, they were asking me if I had COVID concerns. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I'm more concerned about this finger-shaped organ that has exploded in my stomach. I'm not concerned about getting the sniffles for a couple of days." So no, not going to happen. But these are people. This is not the minority. This is the minority. This is not the majority. But there was at one time people were concerned because people are sheep for the most part, and they have to be told that, oh, you're allowed to take your mask off. Okay, I started putting it off. I guess I'll put it off. I guess that's what life is. I guess I gotta get my vaccine. I guess I don't need to get another one. Like, why did people stop wearing masks? Because somebody had to tell them to. Why, instead of doing their own research, they had to be told. But these people are true believers. I almost respect it. You're still going on with this. You still really believe it. Well, I haven't gotten sick because I have I took the proper precautions. Yeah, you stayed home for a while. And you probably have been sick on several other occasions. This is interesting. Saw this one over the weekend. There's a show called Love is Blind. I'm not hip to Love is Blind. You know what? I'm not even going to play it here because it's too long. I want to wrap up the podcast at some point. This is going on a little bit too long for me, but probably for you as well. In Love is Blind Season 8, Sarah left Ben at the altar because he didn't have an opinion on Black Lives Matter or the COVID vaccine, and because his church was too traditional and didn't talk enough about LGBTQ. So it was only like a brief moment, which is why I'm not going to go through the whole clip. But this is a woman who's like, yeah, no, sorry, you don't have strong opinions on the COVID vaccine. This is recent. I can understand if we're talking about a show that came out in 2021. Even I don't understand it, but I get that it is part of the time where there were commercials with people with masks on, or you're watching a sporting event. You ever watch highlights of a sporting event from 2020 and 21, and you see masks on the court? You still see them every so often, but it's dystopian to see that we all lived through that not too darn long ago. Also, now that Donald Trump is in charge, he has put Elon Musk in charge of Doge, and the Doge team is going through the USAID files. And it seems to me that the taxpayers, and it seems to me to a lot of other people, that the taxpayers basically paid for the creation of the COVID-19 virus.
By law, all federal spending is required to be publicly available on usaspending.gov. We've known for a while that Dr. Fauci used NIH funding to finance bat coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but it took the watchdog White Coat Waste Project to expose evidence that USAID was funding it too. In fact, the bulk of the money came from USAID. Yet no grants to the Chinese lab appeared on usaspending.gov. It was hidden from the public through layers of unreported subgrants and subawards. Thankfully, my push to defund EcoHealth Alliance was successful, and the group is now barred from receiving U.S. government grants. But this is why my TRACS Act must become law to prevent money being sent to China, the Taliban, or any other foreign adversary. Every grant recipient must be disclosed to ensure accountability, and we shouldn't stop there. My bipartisan Stop Secret Spending Act, introduced with Ranking Member Peters, would add additional transparency to federal spending. So, Mr. Schellenberger, I'll start with you, please. Why is USAID so secretive about how it spends billions of taxpayer dollars? Is it to avoid the public outrage over the waste, or is there something more nefarious there?
Well, thank you, Senator. And first of all, thank you for your leadership in bringing transparency and accountability to aid and the funding there. Obviously, this example you just gave of the Wuhan Institute of Virology is incredible. I mean, the fact it appears that the U.S. government funded the creation of the virus that caused the global pandemic.
That's interesting. Also, some other fun stuff from Doge. They uncovered a $36,000 COVID loan to a 157-year-old. 157. Now, I'm no biologist, I am no doctor, but I don't think people live that long. A $36,000 COVID loan. $36,000, that's what a lot of people would love to make that in 1 year, especially if you work in radio. It's like double some of their salaries. Oh, goodness gracious. So now we talk about the reactions, and that you're seeing nearly a million adverse reactions to Pfizer. Actually, it's more than that if you start to really add up Moderna and Johnson & Johnson. Check this one out.
They knew that these things were life-threatening. They knew they were causing severe injuries and deaths, and they kept selling them to the public as safe and effective.
Emails obtained by Children's Health Defense reveal government's failure to monitor COVID vaccine injuries.
In the first 18 months of the COVID shots, there were 1.4 million adverse event reports, and they expected up to 40% of them to be serious. There were 806,000 Pfizer adverse event reports, 491 Moderna, and 91,000 J&J. And the CDC totally predicted these adverse events. They were predicting 1,000 VAERS reports a day, and they actually ended up getting 2,500. What's so upsetting about this, Polly, is the lies. I mean, to me, that's what's so awful here. And it's not so surprising given what we experienced, but I think it makes a difference when you see in writing that they knew and they kept doing it.
Yep. That's a lot of reactions. Some people are kind of in denial, which is why they keep talking about having long COVID. You probably have seen this one. Yale researchers find COVID spike protein in blood 709 days after vaccination, positing millions of long COVID patients may actually be vaccine injured. I don't know people who've gotten COVID and start saying they have long COVID that aren't vaccinated, but every single one that I see, I have long COVID. See, I got my vaccines and I got my booster, but I ended up getting COVID and I still haven't recovered. I can't walk properly. It's foggy to me. My eyesight isn't great. I still have a mark on my arm. I'm having blood clots and all this other stuff. It's like, yeah, it seems like long COVID is a reaction to the vaccine that you got. Just my opinion. It seems to me that you know, obviously that I'm no doctor, I'm no epidemiologist, but it seems to me that the people who are complaining the most about long COVID are ones who've been up to date on all their boosters. Which one is this one? Wait, there it is. Yale researchers identify post-vaccination syndrome linked to mRNA COVID shots causing brain fog, dizziness, tinnitus, or tinnitus, depending on how you talk about it, and exercise intolerance. Findings show immune changes, lingering spike proteins, and reawakened Epstein-Barr virus, according to the Daily Mail. So there you have that. That's kind of interesting. Now, this one, some people have predicted over time, and I'm wondering what you folks would think about this. So they have been discussing this. I know this is Owen Benjamin talked about this because he says, hilarious. I called this 5 years ago. It's always a choice. COVID vaccine death is now considered suicide by insurance companies. No one ever forced it. Tell yourself what you want, as it has always been voluntary and an experiment for an illness that only existed in your mind. That's what Owen says. My belief was that, yeah, that's the way they're going to do it because they've been playing this little game of, the semantics game of we didn't actually force it. Meaning they didn't strap you to a chair with a big needle and pull down on the plunger and shove it into your arm. They'll say, well, I mean, you'd be ostracized from your social circles and your friends will unfriend you and your family doesn't talk to you and your job fires you and you lose everything. But no one forced you to get vaccinated. So this is going to be interesting if this indeed comes out and they treat it as suicide, which if you knowingly took something that could be deadly, then I'm not saying that they have a case, but...
Experiment, and death from a medical experiment is not a covered entity. Furthermore, even the judge says that the side effects from the vaccine are well known, they've been made public. There's absolutely no way that this gentleman could not have known the side effects. He willingly chose to get the vaccine, and he died as a result. And because it was a choice, they're calling it a suicide.
Can you repeat the part of the stuff where you said all about the things?
And suicides, along with death from experimental drugs, are not covered in life insurance. So I know what you're thinking. Oh, that happened in France. That would never happen in the U.S. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but the American Life Insurance Council has also said that life insurance policies may deny payment if you die from the COVID-19 vaccine because they are experimental drugs. There you go. This is something we thought might happen. We're seeing it happen. You might want to check your policy.
You could talk about tinfoil hat conspiracy theories, but me just mentioning that I don't know about this shot that you're trying to force onto people meant I was a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist 4 years ago. So I've seen stranger things happen as time has gone on. Let's see. What is this one here? Oh, this is a good example. So, as I mentioned, when being at home, and it just seemed like a lot of people thought, I'll just stay home, be in a little bubble, hermetically sealed bubble in my home. The only time I'll get out, I'll put a couple of masks on and bathe in Purell and everything, and I don't really need to go work out. And then I'll get this vaccine, I'll be protected. But ultimately, I think we realized that you probably should have been exercising all along, and you should probably be listening to this podcast while you're exercising.
I think the most interesting finding of the last decade in all of science. When you contract your muscles, they literally secrete these proteins into your bloodstream that make you resilient to stress and can protect you from depression. The scientists called them hope molecules. This idea that your muscles are manufacturing antidepressant molecules, and the only way to get them into your bloodstream is you have to contract your muscles. It's like a pharmacy in your muscles. And anything you do that contracts them, walking, hiking, running, dancing, weightlifting, like swimming, anything, you are going to be dumping hope molecules into your bloodstream. They also help people recover from trauma. That's like a miracle. Because of course it's wonderful when medications work for you, but for so many people, medications don't do the full job in terms of helping with mental health. And the idea that your muscles could provide you with the equivalent of something like an antidepressant medication, I think it's phenomenal. I think the most...
How about that? So it's probably why they wanted us stuck at home, sitting on the couch. Don't get up. Don't walk your dog. Don't get your mail. Don't go for a little jog. Certainly don't run or ride your bike anywhere. Just stay home. And it just made people a lot more depressed. I've noticed a lot of people we all went through a series of depression, but I think the people who got more active and were doing things and went on vacations and sightsaw during that time. Sightseeing, I guess. Sightsaw. If you did something, you went hiking, that you bounced back from whatever pandemic depression was going on than the people who are still depressed. They're still joyless at home. Try to speed thing. Go do a little bit of a speed round here. What is this? Oh, so RFK Jr. So this is always really funny. Just going back in time. Again, RFK was a Democrat. He's still a Democrat. He's a 90s, 2000s Democrat. He's an old school liberal. He's certainly not some far right winger. In fact, the topic of vaccines was a left-wing thing of being anti-vax. It was like the anti-vax moms of the late 90s, early 2000s. When you saw Jim Carrey and Jenny McCarthy making their rounds on CNN talking about being anti-vax, that was a left-wing position because, you don't want to support Big Pharma. And then all of a sudden around Occupy Wall Street in 2010, 2011, 2012, everybody kind of fell in line, and there was a repositioning of the politics. So now RFK is considered like far right-wing. That's interesting.
President Trump wrote on Twitter, "Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life." Don't let it dominate your life?
In terms of responding to a comment like that, it's gross.
It's okay to be afraid of COVID, and it's okay that it's dominating your life.
Everyone should be afraid of COVID.
You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
I can't come in, Mom. It's because of this flu thing.
We won't be free of this pandemic until we listen to the acknowledged truth. Listen to the scientists.
Science is truth.
Okay, so anyways, I don't want to go through it because that's basically what I've discussed in the podcast. This is why they don't like RFK. It's because he actually challenged the approved narrative of the time. He wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci, and here he is saying it was just all orchestrated. This was last year at the Reawaken America, the American Faith Conference.
How many of you have heard of Event 201? Event 201 is a simulation that they did right before COVID hit, and it was a drill for how to handle pandemics. But it didn't do the things you would think they would do, like how do we fix the VAERS system to make sure that we get good data? What they talked about was how to turn America into a totalitarian state. How to impose censorship. In my book on Fauci, I've been able to find 22 of those simulations. And they have been practicing this for year and year. It's all sponsored by the CIA, as I demonstrate. Fauci and Bill Gates play key roles in them. Bill Gates called Fauci in 2000 to his home in Seattle, $147 million home, 40 acres on Lake Washington. He sat Fauci down in his library and he said, "I want to propose to you a partnership. You and I work together to vaccinate the world." The story in my book tells exactly how they went through that. And the story of these simulations is critically important because it was the way that they prepared. They didn't just have a few people involved. They had hundreds of thousands. Cops these were all top secret. Police officers in every community in this country, healthcare workers, first responders, were all drilled in this. How to censor, how to silence, how to impose tracking and tracing, how to do control. So they all went through these drills again and again, and it was a way of drilling and practicing a coup d'etat against American democracy. All of the techniques they use, I've spent a lot of time studying the CIA because my family was in a 60-year fight with them, and I wrote a book about that battle called American Values. But I've read all of their manuals, and they have techniques for going into indigenous countries and causing chaos, shattering the societies, destroying the economy, creating social distance between people so that there's no unit cohesion. And then when everybody is demoralized and destroyed, coming in with a centralized control and imposing, as they did with all of us, they locked down America in a hostage taking. And they impose something that is part of their technique, which is called Stockholm Syndrome, where the captive becomes grateful to their captor and identifies with them and understands, comes to this belief that the only way that they can save their lives is through absolute obsequious obedience to their captors. And all of these drills were intended to impose and to induce that condition in the entire public. And
Okay, so I could stop it there because it goes on another few minutes, but I guess as I start to wrap up the podcast, because there's a couple of other things, like Randy Weingarten is still around. The cockroaches are still crawling. She's the one who kept the schools shut down and wanted them shut down for the foreseeable future. And now she's mad about Trump getting rid of the Department of Education.
This is why so many people are so mad about it, because they're just taking opportunity away from kids that don't have it. So billionaires, kids of billionaires, they have it. They go to private schools. Everyone else, 90%, go to public schools. Don't take away their opportunity.
So let's stay on the facts.
Sorry,
No,
I'm
do
really
not
angry
apologize.
about this.
No, because this
I'm
is what
really
people
angry.
need to hear.
I taught kids in Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn, New York.
I'm sorry you did that, because I don't think you did a very good job. These people need to pay in more ways than one, even if some of them have gotten pardoned, the blanket pardons that some are suggesting they may still go after Dr. Fauci. We'll see. We'll see where this goes.
Can the same at all be true for Fauci? Can we hold these people responsible even if they were pardoned before any fact came out that showed them doing things wrong or any charges?
Glenn, you're absolutely right. Number one, we're still assessing the legal validity of President Biden's corrupt pardons. But at the end of the day, regardless of what the federal government does, the federal government can't pardon individuals for offenses under the state law. So they can still be charged at the state level. And certainly, all options are on the table here in the state of Missouri.
Well, let's see if that happens, because I'm not confident that stuff is gonna go on. I mean, within minutes of leaving office, Joe Biden on January 20th, 2025 decided, we're going to pardon a bunch of people. We're going to pardon my whole family, and then we're going to pardon Mark Milley and Dr. Fauci and everybody on the January 6th committee. And did so just blanket pardons. Now that obviously if you're going to get charged with something at some point, then if you accept the pardon, which, by the way, Fauci doesn't have to, but he accepted it anyways. It means you're giving up your Fifth Amendment right to blah, blah, blah. I want accountability, and not just someone got voted out. Yeah, there were plenty of politicians who got voted out in the last couple of years, and some of it had to do with their stance on COVID, others just being bad politicians. I want to see the accountability of being thrown behind bars for what they did, for what I showcased in this podcast. Now, again, many of you are probably going to be like, we'll see what happens. I mean, Pam Bondi, for God's sake, has this empty binder of Epstein file stuff, and you really haven't seen too much. You're hearing about Release the Kraken Part 2. No, we'll see. I'm not confident that stuff is going to happen. I think, not to sound black-pilled, but it seems to me that much of this is going to get memory hold, and anytime you bring up COVID from now on, it's going to be like you're still talking about it. That was an inconvenience a couple of years ago. Yeah, it sucked, but get over it. We're dealing with new things now. And I don't want to get over it. I'm not going to get over it. You still see people who are talking about the wars in the Middle East, that Afghanistan and Iraq, and that's been 20 something years. So this one's only 5, and I'm going to continue talking about it until I am blue in the face or I'm bored with doing a podcast and I feel like I want to end it. So what have we learned today? What have we learned during this podcast? Well, I think, again, a lot of politicians have lost their seat in whatever, in the House, in the Senate, their governorship, their, maybe they're state senators, maybe they're congressmen or local politicians and mayors. Maybe they lost them because of what happened, but not enough. Not enough. And I think the people at the top who collaborated, as you heard there from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that a lot of this stuff had been planned. That everyone from Francis Collins and his stupid guitar to Dr. Fauci to Rochelle Walensky and everybody else who kept us home, and everyone else who wasn't part of the cabal to push this narrative, that wasn't in charge. Everyone else, like Keith Olbermann, just shame them. Just make them irrelevant, meme them out of existence. That's what you do. So you hold the people who are actually in charge of our day-to-day life, that we had to ask what our governor says that we can do today, and the suggestions and recommendations from people. And like with everything, the truth does come out. We're already learning about the truth of Joe Biden's cognitive decline, and he's only been out of office for like 8 weeks. So, which we all knew about that at the time, too. Some of us said it. Some of us were able to come out there. Some of us talked about that Derek Chauvin should have been pardoned from the very beginning. Some of us have been out in front, but eventually it does seep into the mainstream, and we will learn some of the truth. As I read there with that Deborah Birx, the scarf lady, like, our whole goal was with the 15 days to flatten the curve was just that was just a marketing tool to push for harsher Italian lockdowns. I'm not saying that somebody needs to take her scarf and put her on over a telephone pole, but I'm not calling for any of that stuff. Not doing it. But they should be held accountable in the court of their peers. So, yeah, it's time. It's time to do that. And I think a lot of people who listen to my podcast and people who are in this realm, you may not be as gung-ho about it as you may have been 2, 3, 4 years ago, but I think for the sake of people who couldn't see their families, I couldn't see my grandmother before she passed away, and also she bought into all this stuff. For the mother who lost her husband and her kids could not put their arms around her at her husband's funeral, or the grandma with the dementia who was too confused to understand what is going on, that her son wants to see her and the hospital said no visitors. For the kids who lost several years of development, for just people, just general sanity, or financially, that many have not recovered since then. I think there needs to be accountability, not just because I'm selfish and want to see I want to see a perp walk of Francis Collins with his stupid guitar and Fauci getting frog marched into a prison. But I want to see that, but I want to see that for everyone else's sake who was affected negatively by that. So you want your COVID, your pandemic, what's the pandemic nostalgia? That's what you're nostalgic about? Way different priorities nowadays. So as the bells chime on Big Ben and we're doing commemorations of the 5-year anniversary, just know that this didn't need to happen. We didn't need to lock down. We would have been much better off just dealing with it and living with the virus instead of shutting society down and demonizing people for political gain. Let's be honest, that's what it was. And we did that. And you need to stay vigilant because it could happen again at some point. I'm not saying exactly like this, but there might be some shenanigans that happen down the road that you must be prepared for. Alrighty. Thank you, everybody, for listening and listening to and watching this podcast. Again, if you are checking it out for free on Rumble and YouTube and Twitter and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and other podcast platforms, I am on Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur, TonyMazur. You can subscribe for free if you want, but you only get this episode for free. Everything else is behind a paywall at $3, $5, and $10 with extra content. Thank you, everybody, for listening to and watching this podcast. And I'll be back with another free episode of the Check Your Brain podcast coming up next week. Bye, everybody.